Hello and welcome to this episode of The Rest is Entertainment with me, Marina Hyde.
And me, Richard Osman. What a busy week you've had, Marina. You've been in LA, and I don't mean Little Lambton. I mean Los Angeles.
I went to LA for a period of around 60 hours, which in some ways flatters the city, I feel.
You saw all the sights?
But I went for the premiere of the show that I write on, The Franchise, which is coming out on HBO. You can watch it on Sky Comedy or Now TV. The premiere was at Paramount Pictures at the lot, which is the only lot that's still in Hollywood, and it's so historic and so beautiful. And it was one of those kind of perfect evenings, you know, great weather and all the kind of really old palm trees. And the lot itself, which I'd never been to before, is absolutely incredible. And I don't know, it's sort of interesting because Paramount's being sold at the moment, and you almost feel like, is this lot this piece of real estate their biggest asset? Because it is absolutely huge and stunning and old. But
it's the Maidstone Studios, though.
No.
But at some point, when the show's coming out, I want to do an absolute nose to tail, how a big show like that gets made, what happens, all that kind of stuff. Let's start with Boris Johnson. So the book is out this week.
It's called Unleashed, which sounds like a very poorly rating GB News show, but is actually the title.
But it's also the sort of thing that Jamie Laing would call his autobiography. Jamie Laing from Made in Chelsea. Finally.
Obviously, he's got a big sort of promotional strategy to promote the book, and we'll talk about quite what that entails. But it's been sort of funny because two of the big things for that have been beset by problems, which is Laura Kuenssberg, who was going to do a big interview for the BBC, had to pull out because she accidentally WhatsApped him the sort of briefing notes for her interview. And then Beth Rigby was going to interview him at Cheltenham, where I just interviewed you, Richard, yesterday, which was great fun.
Also, nice to meet lots of fans of the podcast.
Oh, there were so many. It was amazing.
Yeah.
Beth Rigby from Sky was going to interview him, but apparently there was some dispute, like she couldn't make a transcript of it or record it. And therefore, she has also pulled out. I mean, I quite enjoyed the novelty because you don't hear the phrase Boris Johnson pulling out in the same sentence very often, so that bit's quite enjoyable. But tell me, how do you think this book is going to go, Richard?
I mean, that's the big question. As I had good news and bad news. The bad news is it's going to go pretty well.
Yeah.
I would say it's not going to be a Liz Truss. Okay, no. It's going to sell a lot of copies. I think the good news is it's not going to sell as many copies as the publishers think it's going to, or as Boris Johnson thinks it's going to. I don't imagine Boris Johnson really cares how many it's going to sell because he's already got his advance. So just to go through the numbers. So his advance, it was reported his advance was 500,000, but. Again, more bad news. That is just a quarter of his advance. So that's the first quarter you get paid on signature of a contract. So he would have got 500,000 when he delivered it, which presumably is about 3 or 4 weeks ago. He will get another 500,000 this Thursday when it's released. Have a little think about that when you're walking past Waterstones. And he'll get another 500,000 when the paperback comes out, which is probably, I would think, March, April, or something like that. So the advance would be about 2 million, I would think. Political biographies are interesting. So Blair's one is sort of held up as the exemplar of great-selling biographies, autobiographies of British Prime Ministers. His sold 92,000 copies in its first week. When Thatcher's came out, it was just before the Nielsen ratings.
Pre-Nielsen, yeah.
Yes, but they reckon about 120,000. Yeah. So Blair 90, Thatcher 120. Those are, which are both, by the way, huge numbers in books. I mean, really, really big numbers. And I would have thought, I would be surprised if he wasn't nestled somewhere around there. It'll sell a lot of copies. But I've been talking to an awful lot of people in the publishing industry, and there are voices at HarperCollins, which is his publisher, which is part of News Corp, who think it's going to sell as well as the Prince Harry book.
The fastest-selling memoir of all time.
The fastest-selling memoir
Amazing.
of all time, which sold over 400,000 copies in its first week. I've made a lot of predictions on this podcast. 94% of them have been absolutely incorrect. But I'm very comfortable in saying I don't think it's going to sell as many as the Prince Harry autobiography, would be my view. I think it'll sell well. I don't think it's going to sell crazily well. Now, that advance of 2 million, if you're worried about him making royalties, I don't think he's ever going to earn out that advance. I think it'll sell okay, but he would have to sell maybe 600,000 hardbacks and the same again in paperback to earn that back, which I don't think he will.
He sold 600,000 books in total in his career, which is obviously not at all bad.
So I don't think he's ever going to earn out. So I think that 2 million is all he's going to get. And of course, you take off 300,000 of that for his agent's fees. Imagine being Boris Johnson's agent. Oh my
Yeah.
God, can you imagine? I mean, at least they're getting 300 grand, but I don't know if it's worth it putting up with that. That'll be taken off. One assumes he's going to pay his tax on it as well. So it'll come down. I know Blair's autobiography, all the profits went to charity. I'm not sure that that's what's happening, given the size of Boris Johnson's family. He has got people to pay for.
There's a weird thing about it. One thing I noticed, which is that they're doing something slightly it's almost like the IMAX version of it. There's a limited edition premium version, which is signed deluxe cloth bound in a slipcover. I haven't seen this before.
Well, do you know where that comes from?
Where?
Is the place you get that is in fantasy novels, which is very apt. If you look at some of the stuff that's in there, so fantasy novels are very big on doing like a cloth bound, incredibly limited edition signed thing. Sort of one of 200, and
with an illuminated map of the land at the start.
Exactly that. So let's see Boris Johnson's illuminated map of Britain. See where it stops.
Yeah.
I'm guessing somewhere around North London. As far as I can tell, that's a worldwide advance because no one's really going to buy this in America and Australia. So that money will be for the whole of the world. So he's not getting extra money from Lithuania like normal authors might do. So listen, I'm trying as much as I can to make 2 million sound as little as possible, but that is what he's getting, and it's a huge amount of money. And for 700 pages of what I'm sure you'll be telling us about. Other people's autobiographies. So Thatcher, 120, let's say. Blair, 92. Cameron, first week sales, 21,000. Yeah. Gordon Brown, first week sales, 9,000. John Major, first week sales, 5,500. Theresa May, 3,500. And who's this at the bottom of the list? With 2,200 sales, Liz Truss. There you go. Boris, I suspect he'll sell over 100,000, but the publishers I think want him to sell.
That's nothing like enough. That is nothing like enough
to make that money back. And also, usually you would. Here's an interesting thing. I'd love your take on this. Normally with HarperCollins, they'll give you a £2 million advance because they will do a deal with one of their newspapers, the News Corps, which will amortise that cost. So they will say, essentially, we can do the exclusive extracts from this, and that is worth an awful lot of money. So that goes into the advance. But in this case, the extracts have been in the Daily Mail.
What on earth happened there? Why didn't they nail it down for 2 million? I'm amazed. They must have felt he was at the peak of his negotiating powers. I think that is again, it's good work on behalf of the agent, but it's not on behalf of the people who negotiated that deal at all.
My assumption is, I could be wrong about this. So his salary at the Mail is $1 million.
Yeah.
Which he's definitely not earning. The columns are fairly irregular and they're not very good. And this is just absolute bog standard
Well, they don't
stuff.
have any purchase on, they're not what people are talking about.
Literally no one's paying any attention. But I'm guessing that £1 million was pre-baked in, that they got
then they'll get the serialisation rights, I would have thought.
That makes more sense of that money because that's an insane amount to pay someone who some people like, but most people are not that interested in anymore. It's sort of yesterday's news. Now, lots of journalists have done diligent work on all of our behalves and read all 700 pages.
But you know what you had to do? You could see it, but you had to go into a room and read it, in a sort of closed environment.
And you came out pregnant.
And you came... What just happened? Yeah.
Yeah.
And I mean, like he said, he said when he announced it, he said, "Stand by for my thoughts on Britain's future to explode over the publishing world like a much shaken bottle of champagne." I'm so glad you never talk like that, even though your sales shit on his and always will. I tell you what, we did hear that perhaps there are still tickets available at time of recording for his appearance in Cheltenham in that big tent that you sold out.
And Manchester as well.
And that I've sold out before.
Yeah.
Strange that the big tent hasn't been sold out. But
I know for someone who's about to sell as many as Prince Harry. Also, I'm hearing his event in Liverpool might be being rescheduled.
Yeah.
You think?
For the 12th of Never?
Yeah.
He's done what is quite a conventional sort of strategy for a type of book like this, which is that he's got lots of little news lines that he's trying to parcel out, saying, I don't know, everyone gets their own sort of thing. He did an interview with Tom Bradby, one of the people who hasn't pulled out of an interview with him for ITV. That was where he said, I regret apologising for Partygate. And he was asked, do you regret apologising to the Queen? I don't discuss my conversations with the Queen. Sorry, what? I think you do, because you have. What is this hanky clutching? You have revealed that she had bone cancer, which you discuss anything. I mean, I'm a trustworthy man. Yeah. So there's the whole book though is that sort of the people who have sat through it, this is not one for the personal growth section of the bookshop. If you like the tone, then maybe you can do 700 pages of it.
Yeah.
But I find it so extraordinary that this is in one of the published excerpts, which I think is really interesting when he's talking about nearly dying from COVID. It wasn't just the physical distress, it was the guilt. It was the political embarrassment of it all. I needed to be oing back on my feet like an India rubber ball. I needed to be out there, leading the country from the front, sorting the PPE, fixing the care homes, driving the quest for a cure. Is that your reflection on a near-death experience? It's the most one, he is a deflector. This is the trouble. What we want in a political memoir is the behind the scenes, the emotions, I suppose, in lots of ways that people, because we know what the front of house was doing.
Yeah.
And I suppose you want the emotion, but, he, as we say, emotion's his phantom limb, and it doesn't seem to twitch at all in this book.
Well, that's the fascinating thing, isn't it? If that's in anyone else's autobiography, that's a hugely meaningful thing. He nearly died. He's got a young family. So you think, well, that's the moment where you say, here's the real me. Here's the real human being. But I don't think he's able to look himself in the mirror like that. I don't think he has a true image of himself where he can go there. I don't think he has the well to go to say, this is the real me, or this is how I felt about this. This is the emotion of it. This is how I felt about other people dying because, this is what I went through. And extraordinary to be able to write that. And he might go, yeah, listen, I'm being, brave, and, there's more important people. But it's not. It's an autobiography. It's an incredibly important moment in somebody's life. And also, if I'm going to read 700 pages, I can do 5 pages on how mortality feels and what he felt about what he'd achieved in life and all of those things. And it seems a strange thing well, it doesn't seem a strange thing for him to leave out, because he's always left out that core of who actually are you, not how do you come across, not how can you make people laugh, not how can you deflect. It's who actually are you. And to do 700 pages without telling people who you actually are, well, that tells people who you are, I suppose. I
mean, the thing that was so great about that series that I banged on about, the corridors of power, should America police the world, was seeing those decision makers. You knew the news stories, and many of them were about things and genocides that had happened decades before, but the rawness with which they were in the present day talking about what they were feeling, what was going on behind those closed doors, is so compelling. And that's what makes it compelling. So more of the same is a sort of odd decision. I mean, I think actually if he were, even if he were to have that character arc, which he still wants, because it's the only place he makes sense to him, if we think of him as a fictional person,
which he thinks
essentially he is a fiction of his own creation. He needs, this is the point where it goes wrong, and then you have your third act redemption. So if we accept his premise that he's in only Act 2 and he's about to get a sort of hot Top Gun style redemption in Act 3, then you need to have a low point, and we need to see this. But it's not. Yeah,
you need to have an act that's just entirely Robert Jenrick.
Yeah.
And then he returns on a motorbike with like a gunship helicopter above him.
Yeah.
4 more kids riding pillion.
Yeah. In fact, I felt that he was. But in a funny kind of way, all these people pulling out of doing those interviews, and and I know it's not the formal reason, but there is something so sort of washed up about all these women finding something slightly better to do with their time. And this is the post-prime ministerial life, and it is an exquisite form of agony for a person who only makes sense to himself in that job for which he sacrificed everything and everyone.
Well, that's it. So Boris Johnson had a career in politics, right? And it's very easy for someone like Boris Johnson to get to the top in politics. He now has a career in entertainment.
And by the way, entertainment of like finance ministers and stuff at some horrendous summit that we behind closed doors in Singapore in a 7-star hotel. We don't have to watch it anymore.
I think we'll get to the point where suddenly he becomes an entertainment figure as well. And he will find the competition there a great deal harder. And by the way, he can absolutely hold his own. We've said it before. He can write. He can turn a phrase. He's got shtick, which is what you really need in entertainment. Like, he's got a thing. He's got, like, Johnny Vegas has got shtick.
Yeah.
Boris has got, right. We know the thing that he does. And, he's making his money now in the book, and he'll start making money on other TV shows and things like that. But it's definitively, he's not in the world of politics anymore. And I found it the Laura Kunsberg stuff, and I'm sure on West's Politics they've talked forever about the, you know, sending the briefing notes and what that means and why that might mean a interview is compromised. But the fact that was scheduled at all is a disgrace. I mean, is a disgrace. That is literally a half-hour advert for a book, a commercial book funded by the BBC. That no one needs to hear him being interviewed. If we want to see what he thinks, well, there's plenty of places to see that. We don't need a half an hour, and all it is any publicist for any book ever will tell you, if you can get me 5 minutes on the local news, that's amazing.
Yeah.
What, a half hour interview on the BBC, on the main channel, and reported in every single newspaper. That is...
I was thrilled that, I don't know why people were complaining about it, you know, the notes being sent. He's lost out on half an hour of primetime promotion. Yeah. I couldn't be happier.
No, that's what I thought. I thought genuinely his publicist will be so, gutted beyond words. That's the absolute dream. That's like, I mean, it's not quite him being on Graham Norton, but it's a pretty close second.
Yeah.
And then they did it on ITV instead, and you think... What scoop do you think you're getting here? What is it that you think you're showing that people are going, oh my God, they got Boris Johnson?
Well, in some ways, it's a record, and there are revelations in it which he should be asked about. Invading the Netherlands.
Yeah,
I can't even remember what the other stupid ones were.
That's a gag one, though, right? That's
but all of the stuff
he knows what he's doing.
Was done as a bit.
Yes. That's
with
the thing.
With an eye on what, you know, it's rather like Cicely and the importance of being earnest. Cicely says, you know, this is a young girl's diary and consequently meant only for publication. You know, these are the sweet thoughts of a Prime Minister. All the time you're doing them, you're thinking, oh, I see, you're doing this because it'll be for your column later, not your column, for your book. Yeah,
exactly that. The whole Netherlands thing is a bit of shtick. And I saw a really good interview with Sir Anthony Seldon, who's done biographies of every single Prime Minister ever. And they said, who's the worst Prime Minister in history, living or dead? And he said, well, I have the same answer to both. And it was Johnson. And its basic thesis behind it being Johnson is the utter unseriousness he had for the role. And it's, by the way, it's so fine to be unserious in public life. You know, it's absolutely fine. But to be Prime Minister as well, you think, come on, you have to pick a lane. You can either have fun, like making jokes and pretending to invade the Netherlands, and there is a career to be had in that, or you can be Prime Minister. Like, don't try and do both, I would say.
But regrettably, I think I would say that if you have a relatively recent Prime Minister, only not the last but one because of the ridiculous catalogue of them we had at the end of the years of the sort of Tory administration. If you talk about those times and there are revelations in your book, then I don't think there's anything particularly odd about there being television interviews about them. It's one of those things that people always say, just stop writing about Nigel Farage. Well, I'm afraid they can't really, because a significant number of people vote for this person and they have to be interrogated. And you may not like it and it may not be your politics, but you actually have to have these people on television. I'm not convinced that the revelations in this book warranted that, maybe a 5 minutes, a half hour, no. But I still think that they have to be asked about these things, and they have to be asked about, and it's an opportunity to ask them perhaps other things that since they've been leaving office. And it may not be lovely, but it is part of the way that we do things. But I mean, obviously, as I say, I've been absolutely thrilled that he lost out on the half hour promotion. There may also, given who we're dealing with, be masses of factual inaccuracies, and that is actually, relatively significant, and he has to be called on that. That his best-selling book, which I think has sold 270,000 copies, which is The Churchill Factor. By the way, listeners, if you haven't read this review ever, please go to the New Statesman website and read Sir Richard Evans's, who's a Cambridge historian, review of his book about Churchill, which is one of the biggest drive-bys I've ever read. It's absolutely hilarious. Richard Evans, he has a new book out at the moment called Hitler's People, which is about the sort of personalities in the Third Reich, and is really good. The end of this paragraph, which has just gone through various factual inaccuracies, says, the Germans did not capture Stalingrad, though this book claims they did. You've written a book basically about the Second World War and you don't know the result of Stalingrad? I'm so sorry. It's just one of those... It's like being a football correspondent and thinking that like Bayern Munich won the Champions League final in 1999. You sort of have to know it. Yeah. But there are limitless of these. So it's probably there are things that he needs to be pulled up on by journalists.
Well, look, he's a grifter, and I genuinely, I don't say that with any edge. There are plenty of people who are very charming grifters and who do it in a harmless way and make a very good living. But, he is a grifter who has an awful lot of impact on everyone's life. But he was a grifter as a columnist. He's a grifter as a prime minister. Grifter as an author. I mean, that's his shtick. And there's, as I say, it's so fine to be a grifter. We all do it from time to time. But we will look back, I suspect, historically, and go, wow. And through a strange confluence of events, that's who we had as our prime minister at a time of enormous crisis, genuinely enormous crisis, and a time of enormous opportunity as well.
Yeah.
Both of which he didn't really make the most of. But it is nice, I think, maybe to start this next act where he is no longer a frontline politician, but can instead just indulge his personality and then see how much the public can get behind that and enjoy that, and he can monetize that in any way he wishes without having to bother the rest of us.
Tickets still available for those events, so we'll just keep an eye on those sales, and we will obviously keep an eye on the book sales when they come out. We'll have another little chat about those as a follow-up when they come out.
It'll probably be 2 weeks' time. We might get some early ones for next week's podcast. I'd be very interested to see. As I say, it will do really, really well.
Yes.
It's not, if anyone's looking for it to being in remainders bins, or if anyone's doing tweets saying, oh, look, it's half price, you think, that's because these things are heavily discounted so that shops get market share of these things. It's going to be a successful book, but I suspect he's made every penny he's ever going to make out of it already.
This episode is brought to you by our friends at Sky, who are proud partners of The Rest is Entertainment, where you can watch Sky originals, including Sweetpea, a darkly comic thriller starring Ella Purnell.
Marina, do you like coming-of-age stories?
I most certainly do, Richard.
How about a coming-of-rage story?
Okay, yes, please.
That's clever, isn't it? Well, Sweetpea is a twisted coming-of-age story, as you say, starring Ella Purnell, who people might know from Yellow Jackets, Fallout as well. Unbelievable actor. She's Rhiannon, a quiet wallflower turned serial killer. So her life is pretty mundane at the beginning of it. She continuously is overlooked by her boss. Her long-standing crush ignores her. A high school bully has resurfaced, and her dad is really sick. Then suddenly everything in her life is turned upside down. The wallflower is gone. In its place, a young woman capable of anything. Can she keep her killer secret?
I can't wait to see this. I love any form of, anyone just finally having had enough and losing it.
Yeah, if you're looking for a thriller with a great bit of dark comedy, which is exactly what this is, it's unpredictable. Rhiannon's kill list keeps growing. No one is safe. But the big question is, will she get caught? It's funny. It's very, very dark. The performances are extraordinary. It's strongly recommended. So watch Sky Original Sweetpea from 10th of October on Sky. We're going to talk about The Joker. The follow-up to the Joker movie, Joker Folie à Deux, came out last week.
Yes, and it's opening week, so we know the box office numbers now, and its opening weekend, it grossed $40 million in the US. Now, you might think, that sounds quite a lot of money.
I'd take $40 million.
I would not sniff at it, but this is a $200 million budget. This is a terrible result for this movie. They will have spent almost the same on marketing all over again, as we've often talked about on this podcast, so we won't dwell too long about that. But I think it tells us a lot of really interesting things about Hollywood. Yeah. First of all, this is a really sort of big swing. The first one was a big swing, by the way. It was, it's directed by Todd Phillips, who, despite having once directed The Hangover, he wanted to do it as this dark and gritty kind of New York style, kind of Scorsese-ish movie, almost like Taxi Driver. The star is a villain. But that movie, it was an affordable swing. That movie cost $55 million, right?
And was a huge hit.
It was a huge hit, made more than $1 billion. Joaquin Phoenix won the Best Actor for basically playing a sort of DC character, which is sort of amazing. But in a way, like, why are they doing a sequel? But it's the franchise movie era, so of course they're doing a sequel. And it comes 5 years later. Now, star salaries and Todd Phillips salaries alone cost the budget of the first film.
Really?
This is the problem. Hollywood is still, like, star salaries are dining out on a different time still.
But if you just made $1 billion from the first movie and it was yours, is that not the time for you to cash in?
Okay, but think about it. Another thing that is so fascinating is that, that old dictum about Hollywood that everyone says always, which is nobody knows anything. Oh, these movies that come out and in retrospect, it seems so obvious what was wrong with them. Okay, so here is a movie that was by far and away seen mostly by men, and I don't want to say that, like, a big portion of that was a kind of incel adjacent aspect of the fandom, but yeah, maybe. And so you're going to do, the sequel's going to be a musical, is it, right? Starring Lady Gaga. I mean, I don't want to say, how did this happen? But anyway, okay, so first of all, and then they pay huge amounts of money to the stars and the director. That's like a quarter of the budget. They've had to get venture capital money to even make that up. Okay, in an era where the IP, as we keep saying, is a bigger star than most stars, but stars still want all these salaries, and they're getting them. It is a musical.
Joke of the musical.
Joke of the musical, and once again, we see that they can't really market musicals as musicals because it's limiting. And we've seen this, that's even the case with the Mean Girls, the musical, which was like not Mean Girls, so it must be something different. The difference is it's a musical. But they still keep marketing these movies not as musicals because they think it's limiting in terms of how many people will go and see it, right? How they chose to sort of announce it to the world. They put it on at the Venice Film Festival. Again, these are sort of things that increasingly start to feel from another time before the cold winds were blowing, right? So they stick it on at the Venice Film Festival. It gets really quite bad reviews, which are then sort of sitting there online for a month. And, we talked about this in our Rotten Tomatoes betting thing when we were like, oh, that's not looking great on the, the tracking for what people were going to give it a Rotten Tomatoes score.
And by the way, got a 10-minute standing ovation at Venice.
Yeah, I think it got a 12-minute.
Yeah.
I mean, by the way, the standing ovations at film festivals are complete bullshit. I don't know how anyone can bother being part of one.
It's like party conferences, isn't it? When the leader speaks.
But they're like 1 or 2 minutes. This is 12 minutes. I mean, you're in the south of France. Do you want to go and have some fun?
But also, you just sat through a 2.5-hour movie you didn't enjoy.
Yeah.
Go to the loo. The amount of people who must need a wee when they're doing those 12-minute standing ovations. It must be the energy, surely, in the room. And also the queue afterwards. I can't because I'm tall. You would see me if I slipped out. But surely that's the time to go for a wee.
You've got to crawl out, Richard.
I would have to crawl
Osmondson
out.
crawling out of Cannes Film Festival ovation.
I am so sorry. I
loved it
I just need to go to the loo. I will be applauding in the toilet. I promise you. Okay, I'll come back in and start applauding again.
Yeah, I'll be back in 5 minutes, honestly. Yeah. Never seen again. So look at the sort of big swings in, you had... Another thing that happened in Venice was that the George Clooney and Brad Pitt movie, Wolves, again, quite a lot of money on the star salaries there. They have a huge premiere, and a week before that, they announced, we're not actually going to put it in cinemas at all. It's going straight to streaming on Apple TV Plus, which you might as well do it in the secret diary. No offence. But, and so, again, you're thinking... But let's then talk about the actual content of the film, okay? Apart from the fact that it's a musical and it's starring Lady Gaga and it's an audience maybe starring men, okay? I don't know. Of course they have to make a sequel, but normally what you do in a superhero movie when you want to have a sequel is you pit the hero against a new, perhaps bigger villain, and you're going all the way to the big bad in the final kind of arc of maybe it's a trilogy or whatever it is. But he is the villain. So you can't really... I think we've... it did so well, that first movie, and it was a mood and it was a whole thing and it was a sort of, interesting. But it doesn't really go anywhere all over again. Lady Gaga, right, I think we didn't have what her customary lunacy on the press tour, which we've enjoyed. We talked about this before when we talked about press tours once. But, when she was doing House of Gucci, when she said that she'd hired a psychiatric nurse to be with her at all times, she never broke character for 18 months. She wrote a biography of the character. She thought the whole of Rome she came to believe the whole of Rome was a set. She believed herself to have been cursed by large swarms of flies by the real-life Gucci wife while she was filming. I mean, that was that.
Yeah, she is, if you're a publicist, she is useful.
Yeah. Is she, though? We've had a couple of fun red carpet looks this time and nothing. Is it that she smells something unfortunate on the wind and therefore thinks, I'm perhaps not going to leave it all out there on the stage for my press tour this time? So that was quite helpful even for both of those movies. Is she sort of scented an underperforming outing and not done it? I think it says a lot, this, about sort of franchise movie making and superhero franchise films, which obviously I've spent a long time thinking about. Right, Deadpool, it's an R-rated superhero movie. Deadpool and Wolverine is also an R-rated superhero movie, which they didn't think you could do, but Joaquin Phoenix won Best Actor for one. And Deadpool and Wolverine, it's really interesting. By the way, that movie is now neck and neck with where Barbie was at this time in its release, which, considering it's R-rated, it's had much less kind of grab on the discourse. I guess because Barbie's a family movie and it went across all sorts of things. But that movie has done extraordinarily well. Franchise movies, the total US box office kind of needs to get 9 billion every year, or else things start falling apart.
Same.
By the way, they're all...
Same.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah.
Likewise. But they are slightly falling apart. But franchise movies this year are going to account for about 3 billion of that. And they will probably next year as well.
Yeah.
So it is a huge chunk.
You need them.
You need them. And also, they can't quite think what to do other than them. That is a big problem. They've kind of hollowed out cinema in lots of ways. And when they're failing these movies like this one, they don't know quite what to replace them with. This movie should have stayed at that price. She should have stayed around the 55 million mark, and then it would have done really well. It doesn't have huge action sequences because it's still this kind of... So much of that money has gone on star salaries, and that's a complete... People are living in the past. It can't carry on anymore. In the same way that with Wolves, with George Clooney and Brad Pitt, it can't carry on. And then you say, I can't even put the movie... We're not even putting the movie in cinemas, actually. It's going straight to streaming. Everyone is still dining out on a model that doesn't work anymore.
Well, exactly the same thing is happening in television. You do shows now in TV, and the fees are what they were 5 years ago. And you think, but the viewership is not what it was 5 years ago, and the budget is not what it was 5 years ago. So what's been cut back here? The last thing to get cut is the people on screens money. And in TV, a lot of the time you'll see stuff and you go, that can't make any sense for anybody anymore, because I know what the underlying numbers are. And so for this number to stay the same, it feels there was a corrective about 10 years ago, maybe 15 years ago, but there hasn't been another corrective now. And so that money is still there. But I would say about the Joker, so we talk about franchise movies and superhero movies. The first Joker movie took the idea of a franchise movie, a superhero movie, and did something very, very interesting, unusual with it. Sort of did something very artistic with it, took it into a different place. I know everyone does. This is my dark superhero movie.
Darker and grittier.
Yeah, darker and grittier. But at least it was, it did something unusual. It was an enormous hit, like a huge hit. And people would have said to Todd Phillips before that came out, and would have said to whoever commissioned it, you're crazy to do this. This is not going to make any money. So listen, we'll take a small punt on it, but you are not going to make money on this. And Todd Phillips would have said, trust me. Yeah. Okay. This is going to make money. I know what I'm doing. I know my audience is going to make money. So film comes out, makes billions, and everyone goes, Todd told us. He said, you know what? We thought this was not going to be commercial, but he spotted a new audience, a different audience we hadn't spotted. He made a movie for them, and it's made us a load of money.
Well, speaking of the Third Reich, this is what happened. Once Hitler had done so well in France, this is what all the generals started saying. Maybe he's magic. Maybe we should invade Russia.
Oh, and this is going to make it...
German... Yeah, sorry to bring it back to Hitler.
No, this is going to make it harder for me to do my next bit. So Todd Phillips, who just...
By the way, just to be clear...
For me, is not Hitler.
Yeah.
I understand.
No, likewise. Sorry.
Different opinions are out there. So next time Todd Phillips comes in, and by the way, it took a while before making this sequel, and he comes in and says, I'm going to make a sequel, but it's going to be like nothing you imagined. It's going to be completely different to what you think it's going to be, and it's going to be a musical, and I'm going to have Lady Gaga in it. And all of those executives, again, would have gone, oh no, this is not going to work at all. Todd has absolutely lost his mind. This is just crazy. But then they'd have all gone gone home and slept and go, hold on, that's what I thought last time. But Todd was cleverer than me last time. And Todd had seen an audience I didn't know existed, had understood there's a sensibility that I didn't understand, and made $1 billion. So they would have gone, listen, here's our guy. Let's do it again. So
then give him 75 million. It's a big uplift on the first. And you can use that for Lady Gaga. But please, but if 200 plus marketing probably of 150.
But if I'm Todd Phillips, of course I'm going to make as much money out of that as I can. I've just delivered an enormous hit that everyone told me wasn't going to be a hit, right? Which is the dream of any creative ever. Having the little show that could. Just saying, look, I backed myself, you didn't back me. We did it, and we made an absolute fortune. That's that position you're not in very often in your career, and you have to make hay while the sun shines. So if I'm Todd Phillips, I go, I'm going to make another one, but it's really, really, really going to cost you because this is my payday. He, by the way, thinks he's going to make a great movie, and I don't know why he would ask for less money. And if I was Warner Brothers, I can absolutely understand why I would think we doubted this guy before. We doubted this alchemy that he's got, but now we trust him. And it's one of those things I can absolutely see why every single decision along the line was taken. I see why Todd Phillips did everything he did. I see why Warner Brothers did everything they did. And then at the end of it, you go,
Again,
oh.
like it's so obvious in retrospect.
Yeah.
Which is why nobody knows anything.
Yeah, I can sort of sympathise with everyone who's involved. But this idea of how hard it is to be a studio in Hollywood at the moment, it's so true because, as I say, I see why they did this. But they just had such a big hit with Beetlejuice, like a really properly big hit that they made well and marketed well and all that stuff. And this film has cost them almost exactly the same amount of money that Beetlejuice made them.
Yes.
So they've literally just broken even because they had a big hit and then they trusted someone else.
And they've had a number of other issues over the year, and they've got a number of issues.
But I mean, it's a funny old business.
Yeah.
That's all I'm saying. But I haven't seen Joker Folie à Deux. I haven't seen the original Joker either. It doesn't interest me particularly. All of this is just to say that, you know, people often say, well, people need to take risks or people need to back talent. And that's sort of exactly what they've done here. You know, they have taken a risk. They took a risk with the first Joker. They have backed talent. They backed Todd Phillips. But as you say, somewhere in between those two things is the old Hollywood thing of let's pay enormously over the odds for something.
Yeah, they can't take a risk at this price point on this type of film anymore. And there are certain movies that are coming, you know, this is also, you know, there's this whole other sort of plot line, which is that James Gunn, who directed the Guardians of the Galaxy trilogy, has been brought over to DC to reboot the entire DC universe, and you know they've got their properties as Superman and Batman, but then there are these other movies which they call DC Elseworlds. They're not sort of part of the DC universe.
DC Elseworlds sounds like a solicitor.
I know, yeah, DC Elseworlds. Yeah, it's a sort of regional solicitor, but no, it's actually so. Even the Robert Pattinson Batman, that's not part of James Gunn's new DC universe. The Batman 2 that's coming is not part of the DC universe. This Joker, the original Joker, wasn't part of the DC universe, and nor is this one. So there's all these kind of other projects that are sort of slightly not fitting in. So we don't really know until James Gunn starts unleashing his genius upon us.
But it's fascinating how much effort is going into all these universes and how much almost everybody, and certainly most people listening, certainly me, doesn't care about
they're still fighting yesterday's war. These are yesterday's wars. He's taken the job at the absolute worst time.
Yeah, and listen, people who like them love them, and if you make a good one, that's great. But most people are just getting their entertainment on television because they think, well, they're making stories. You know, they're making stories that I want to follow, and this cul-de-sac of. And by the way, I think the Marvel Cinematic Universe is one of the single greatest bits of content ever created in any medium. It's extraordinary, but I do. You know, if you look at the glory years of that and what they did and how they sort of crossed things over, you know, and the amount of people they brought into the cinemas, it was extraordinary, an amazing thing they did, an amazing amount of money they made, in the same way that, you know, Star Wars did, but. You know, it can't be all of cinema.
The trouble is, I don't think it is necessarily cinema as we recognised it before, and it has sort of killed cinema and failed to now it itself is on not life support, but it's ailing and it can't support it, and there's nothing to replace it. And turning around the slates of lots of these movie companies is a huge endeavour because they're planning years and years in advance. So you've got all these kind of superhero franchise movies that are still coming out, and they will do. And they, as I say, they still account for a third of all US box office. It's absolutely massive. But if that falls away, then there just aren't sufficient. They haven't sufficiently got their act together and worked out the business plan for how they will credibly replace that and keep the whole industry, the whole ecosystem going. And they're going to have, you know, it's like they know that there's a massive problem and a crisis, but they haven't grasped so many of the different nettles yet. And they're going to have to because it just can't carry on.
Everyone's waiting for a hit. And that's what everyone does in all industries, really. There's a few people who are young and have got a bit of energy who are striving to have a hit. And everyone else is just going, I wonder where there's going to be the next big hit. And then we can follow that for a couple of years.
Yeah, or they say, oh, it's great. You know, there's been Beetlejuice, or there's been, you know, Deadpool and Wolverine. Everything's fine. But everything isn't fine.
But to sum up, Joker Folie à Deux, 3 out of 5.
Yeah, no, I would have to give it less. I just thought it was a big miss.
Can we, as a palate cleanser, talk about Naomi Campbell?
It's not a hugely cleansing story, but yes, I think we can.
What's the opposite of a palate cleanser?
I don't know, an emetic? Right, as an emetic, Naomi Campbell has a charity, or had a charity called Fashion for Relief, which she founded in 2005, and it sort of staged fashion shows and did other sort of fashion-y events in order to raise money for various relief aids and efforts and for different charities. Now, it was investigated by the Charity Commission, which is the charities watchdog, after reports were made by, I think, Save the Children and the Mayor's Fund for London, saying that they'd never got the funds that they had been promised. Now, the investigation has resulted in a fairly devastating report, which they found complete chaos at it. There was evidence of financial misconduct at the charity. I mean, they'd raised something like 5 million or more, at least. It was really unclear. The accounting was sort of next to non-existent, but only 389,000 had been given to partner charities. Now, tens of thousands have gone on luxury hotel rooms, private jets, £8,000 of spa treatments for Naomi in one visit to Cannes, cigarettes. Anyway, the list goes on. Hundreds of thousands of pounds of unauthorised consultancy payments to other trustees. They've been banned. She's been banned. Naomi Campbell has been banned the longest, 5 years, from being a charity trustee at all.
What happens to the money? I mean, they can't claw it back, presumably.
It's very difficult.
It is what it is.
No, yeah. It's really difficult, and this is one of the things that people may or may not have noticed. It does give charities a really terribly bad name, and there are a lot of people out there you see saying on social media, at all sorts of places, I don't give money to charities because they don't give it out. It's given on salaries, and I've got a lot of sympathy with paying the bosses of very big charities a lot of money, because it's a very significant position. They're dealing with huge budgets and really kind of complex decisions about how to allocate aid. And I have, people who are saying, you should have the best people and they should be paid very well to do that.
You get an awful lot more money by having an amazing, well-paid chief executive. That will make you an awful lot more money. As we see with Naomi Campbell and stuff like that, it is very, very, very hard to run a charity, and it's not something for an amateur just to rock up and try and do. But
so many people, I think the most significant thing about it's such an era, this is such a mood. Okay, this was founded in the noughties. Now, this was the absolute high watermark of a particular type of celebrity culture. But on the eve of the Palestinian elections in 2005, Richard Gere did a televised broadcast that said, "Hi, I'm Richard Gere and I'm speaking for the entire world." It's like, no, but
wow.
You're honestly not. Like telling them to get out and vote. There were pictures. I remember seeing a billboard of Gwyneth Paltrow with some blue kind of war paint and a tribal necklace on saying, "I am African." Now, this is it's also the high watermark of getting it wrong. Madonna had a fundraiser for her Raising Malawi charity. She had it on the lawn of the UN, which allowed her to use it. It was in New York Fashion Week, and it also got doubled as a promotion for the new Gucci store. And
wow.
Tom Cruise said, I'm here because it's a fascinating cause and a great label. It was like the real sort of, oh my God, this is so disastrous. Mariah Carey was sending discarded furs to Mongolian yak herders. I remember Christy Brinkley saying, a model talking about a nuclear power plant is going to bring in a different audience to a nuclear scientist talking about a nuclear power plant.
That's true.
Like, yeah, but I don't want to see a nuclear scientist in the Uptown Girl video. I don't want to see it. There's maybe a reason.
Essentially, it brings in an audience of people who don't care about nuclear power plants.
and probably shouldn't be advising on them. Yeah. Sorry, not to, dismiss our modelling career, or indeed the Uptown Girl video, which, as I say, I'm a huge fan of. This was peak UN Goodwill Ambassador, when there was everyone was one. Jerry Halliwell was personally responsible for AIDS and maternal health care in sub-Saharan Africa.
You mean trying to solve it?
Yes. Yeah. It's still a problem.
Yeah, okay.
Breaking. So everybody needed a celebrity spokesmodel. You had celebrities at Davos. You had directors of celebrity outreach for all the charities. You had humanitarian awards. Everyone had to have humanitarian awards because you can't, Angelina Jolie has got so many of these awards. And there are people who work day in, day out trying to solve these really impractical problems and don't make kind of $15 million a movie in between. Where's their award? But for celebrities to be involved in these things, you had to create this whole other structure, these galas, these other things. I have to say, I just don't think celebrities giving money to charity is great. Running their own is another thing. Having said that, there is a huge obverse to this, which again, I really struggle with this. We're also talking about Naomi Campbell, right? There was a time where she appeared at The Hague. Now, I know, who would have thought she would be the first Campbell at The Hague? I'm joking. Times change. Anyway, and she was called to appear. Too much?
No, I don't know. Listen, I get it. I gamble at The Hague. I get it.
She was called to appear before the war crimes trial of Charles Taylor, who was the former Liberian president, and he was on trial at The Hague for crimes against humanity during Sierra Leone's civil war. And the trial had been running at the time since 2007, but in 2010, Mia Farrow put in some evidence to the court saying that she'd been at some dinner with Nelson Mandela and she'd seen Naomi be given a diamond, with the obvious implication that it was a blood diamond, which was part of how he... Anyway, so Naomi Campbell was called to appear at Charles Taylor's trial at The Hague. She went. She immediately announced to the judge, "This is a big inconvenience to me." But you see, and she said, "Look, to be honest, I'd never really heard of Liberia." And Charles Taylor's own defence lawyer said, "Many people hadn't until you turned up today." Okay, so everything about this is really sort of dark and wrong, but every single newspaper covered this piece of testimony. It was, The Guardian, The Times, all live blogged it. It was carried live on Sky News, her testimony at the trial. Okay, normally 20 accredited journalists go to this, went to this. This was the Sierra Leone court at The Hague. Normally 20 accredited journalists would attend this. There were hundreds trying to get in for this. I would say to you that, for better or for worse, the news channels and the news organisations gave more time to this than I would guess than they had to the entire preceding years of the trial.
Yeah.
Only the year before that a commandant had testified and said, "We executed everybody, babies, women, old men. There were so many executions, I can't remember them all." He'd been encouraged to cannibalise victims in exchange for cigarette money. This did not get live blogged. This did not make the front of the news. And therein you see the sort of horrible flip side of it, which is that celebrities draw attention.
Yeah.
And I am afraid to say that this is why people start their charity. Celebrities feel like they can be the operational...
Well, see, there's two different things. I understand why charities have spokespeople who are celebrities. I get that. I know lots of people who run charities, and raising money is so incredibly difficult. And having a celebrity, it's one arm of how you can do that.
Yeah.
Lots of other arms. But it's when a celebrity themselves runs a charity. And there's lots of examples of when that has gone badly. Wycliffe Jean, who made a lot of money for the Haitian earthquake and hurricanes and stuff like that, and again a lot of that seemed to disappear, and that was disbanded. Yeah. But there are examples of celebrities who have set up foundations and charities. The Charity Navigator, which is a thing in the States that gives you 4 stars down to 0 stars as to how well one's charity is run. Our friend Lady Gaga, for example, I think is 0 stars on that. But Elton John is 4 stars, his foundation, and you won't hear a word said against that foundation. Michael J. Fox's Parkinson's Foundation as well, makes a lot of money and spends it well. Jimmy Carter's Carter Center has got 4 stars. Matt Damon and WaterAid as well. So it's doable, but there is, celebrities tend to get messiah complexes, or certain celebrities tend to, and then they go, "I can save the world's problem. I'm going to set up a charity. I'm going to do this." And
I'm not going to draw attention to a cause. Yes. I'm going to be an operational part of solving it.
100% that. And that, again, is that thing. It's the Boris Johnson thing of just going, "Oh, no, I can probably do that.
I'll busk it."
I will busk doing this charity. And running a charity is, as lots of people listen to this, will work for charities or run charities. It is insanely difficult to do. Just a constant, day after day, having to earn the money, get the money in, and then working out the best place to resource it and working out your duty of care to so many people. Just the issues of running a charity are immense. It's almost the worst job possible for a celebrity, because celebrities they get in a car, they turn up somewhere, they look at a camera, they do what they're told, and then they go home. And that to them is a hard day's work. And a charity is the exact opposite. And so when a celebrity has their own charity, I just think due diligence is needed if you're contributing. But the one thing I wouldn't want is for people to see some of these things and think all charities are run like this.
No, it's
because
the worst.
They are not. Charities are doing insanely incredible work, and when someone comes along like this, and listen, maybe it may have been with the best intentions in the world, and it just ran away with them. I absolutely get it. Maybe. but it is not how most charities are
I
run.
know, but it pulls down the whole sector.
It really
And
does.
this is rather a plain fact about Naomi Campbell, but I'm afraid she's not a very nice person.
Whoa.
And, this is it's a sort of simple, it's a huge achievement. She's the first black model on the cover of French Vogue. I don't dispute any of that. And she's broken down lots of barriers. Having said that, at the peak of her fame, she was done for assault for, throwing phones at her maid's head. She. I'm not going to excuse the violence of horrible bosses. She is someone. She had to do community service. She assaulted policemen at Heathrow when her bag had been slightly delayed in the Heathrow, one of Heathrow's many kind of baggage issues, and. She did her community service and she got paid to wear clothes for her community service. I don't think the maid who she assaulted got any of that. It's extraordinary how people will facilitate that type of personality setting up a charity when it is perfectly. Someone like Elton John, who is hugely intelligent, is kind of organisationally, you can see all the things he's done all the way through from like Watford to his own AIDS Foundation, all the way through. It's just a completely different kettle of fish. To be a sort of dilettante and kind of breeze through and think that you can put your cigarettes on the bill is so depressing. And I think 5 years is too little to be disqualified as a charity trustee, I have to say.
It's interesting. People, there is an extent to it. People can charity wash themselves. I say, look at what I'm doing, and it's, it's just that thing of. We all know it when we see it. You just got to use your smarts and go, has this person always been interested in this? Has this person shown charitable? They've done this stuff for years and years and years, and a lot of them won't have. But as I say, some are very well run. I would also say an awful lot of celebrities give an awful lot of money to charity. It's the old smashy and nicey thing and don't like to talk about it, but they genuinely don't. I know a very, very big name comedian who right from the beginning of his career has given 10% of every single penny he's ever earned just immediately goes to charity, and he's earned a lot of money, and lots of other people do that, and lots of people have charitable foundations which don't have their names on them, and they don't appear on television and tell you how great they are, or sort of film videos of them doing relief care or anything like that. So an awful lot of people are giving a lot of money to charity, and if you are Elton or if you are Michael J. Fox, it's absolutely, if you think this is the thing I want to do and I'm going to do and commit completely, it can be incredibly useful for those charities. And J.K. Rowling with the Lumos charity as well. There are examples of celebrities who get involved with charities and run them incredibly well. And it's such a shame that you get some of these things where it just pulls the idea of charities. People want to believe that charities are not doing any good. People want to believe that charities are wasting money because then it absolves them of having to give to charity. It absolves them of that. And actually, you spend any time with people running charities, and almost all of them are breaking every bone they can to not spend an extra penny they don't need to, and to get every single ounce of value out of every single penny that comes in.
T.S. Eliot said, most of the problems in this world are caused by people wanting to be important. And I would say that in this sector, it's awful when things like this happen because people use this as an excuse, as you say, to withdraw from the whole idea of it. And it's just not in general the case of how the whole sector is run.
Yeah, and on a side note, how do you spend £8,000 at a spa?
It's in Cannes. Someone told me they went to a hotel in Cannes recently and one glass of champagne was 88 €88.
Wow.
One.
Wow. Do you get champagne at a spa? Maybe you do.
Yes. I don't know. So I'm, if it was in a hotel like that, I guess scaling up, you can quite easily be on, I don't know, maybe you're on €800 for a massage. I have no idea.
Yeah, it's easier to spend £8,000 at a spa SPA than at a spa SPAR. That is harder.
That is true.
That is harder. One message to take home there: if you're giving to charity, keep giving to charity. They need it more now than ever.
Absolutely. And can my recommendation be a bit of an oldie but a goodie? And it's slightly related to this. It's an essay, which I don't think I recommended before. It is absolutely amazing. It's for Guernica magazine. It was by someone called Katharina Grace Thomas. I will put this in the show notes. And it's about Nina Simone in Liberia. And if you want to be transported, it's one sort of long article. It's so extraordinary. To the Monrovia of the 70s, which was this kind of futuristic place of kind of Afro glamour and decadence, this really progressive capital. And obviously the most terrible darkness falls in 1980, but it is so extraordinary, and it becomes this sort of dream of a place that she felt America could have been during the civil rights struggle, and then she felt betrayed by. And you go there, and people said that Africans come from all over the continent to visit, and they said that if you wanted to see what France was like, go to Côte d'Ivoire. If you wanted to see what the US was like, go to Monrovia.
Wow.
And it's this amazing city, and it's an extraordinary creation of the mood by talking to people who knew Nina Simone during her time there. I can't recommend it enough as to transport you to a place that, without trying to sound like Charles Taylor's defence lawyer, you might not have known existed in that form, because it was the sort of relative, such a brief period before the darkness fell. But I can't recommend that enough. It's in Guernica magazine.
And the author again?
It's called Katharina Grace Thomas, and it's Nina Simone in Liberia.
Amazing. If I can also recommend an essay. No, I'm kidding. I think, because I think that sounds like an amazing recommendation. We covered a lot of ground, didn't we? We really did. Thank you so much. Should we come back and do a questions and answers edition on Thursday?
Let's do that. We shall see you all on Thursday.
See you on Thursday.